I'm here together with Ken Vernaaien. He will introduce himself whenever he starts talking. That's a bit midway through the presentation. He's the knowledge holder on the part on Sigrid. My name is Hugo Schoonewille. I am the Customer Success Manager at the Software Improvement Group, and will host this session. So I'll do a bit of introduction, and then Ken will take over for the actual content part. Please, during the session, if you have any questions, do feel free to pop them in the Q&A, or I think the group is sufficiently small enough to just speak up as well. Ken, maybe you can allow the people to talk as well if they want to. So if you want to just ask your question, we will be able to answer them right away or a little bit later, but we'll handle that. Without further ado, then the session of today, let's briefly look back. Last time we spoke about the objectives. This is the feature within Sigrid that we recently launched, where there is the option to connect your goals, your business goals, to your system and portfolio goals. So wherever a business goal is linked to a technical objective in a system, for example, maintainability or security, there are ways to connect them together. That was an in-depth session. Today, we will still dive into that, but more high over. If you have questions about that, do feel free to ask them. It's called Ask Me Anything anyway, so do so. Then for the session of today, we will be talking about Sigrid as the platform that we built over the past years. It will be an introduction, so a high-level introduction of the different concepts, about the metrics in there, the process, how does it fit into your workflow, as well as how does Sigrid fit into your communication together with the different stakeholders in the projects on your side. And then the most important part, I'd say, is the demo, where Ken will have a few anecdotes from real life where we will discuss different workflows that we came across. So that said, if we looking at the business goals, we're looking at your businesses. You have objectives, as SIG also has objectives. Maybe, for example, you want more customers, you want lower IT spend, you want faster development or less risks. These are the goals, the star, the North Star, as to say, where you want to move towards. We see often, and obviously we see them in the IT context or the organizational context, things about certification and compliance that can help or distract you from achieving the goal, or maybe IT security, which can help you towards your objective, or maybe sidetrack you if there are, I don't know how many security incidents or risks popping up that you did not see upfront upcoming. These are both organizational and technical challenges that, well, if you address them rightfully so, then it may help you towards your objective, but otherwise not so much. Well, as you see, the business goals, they're on top of a iceberg. Iceberg being the metaphor for just the tip of everything that's really happening out there, that everyone sees out there, but is supported by a lot of stuff. Supported by, for example, the software that you develop, the software that you bought, the software that you customized, and then namely the quality of that. So what is quality then? Quality is, whenever we talk about quality as SIG, we talk about security, we talk about maintainability. So how easy it is, you can make changes to your software. Performance optimizations. Have you built your software with the end goal in mind? Yes or no? These things we assess on an automated way using, for example, the ISO standard for software product quality, 25010. For security, other stuff like PCI DSS or the OWASP top 10 are things that we employ. You also see the TÜV logo, the TÜV IT logo, which is the organization that certified us and our maintainability model on correctness. So we redo it every year, and the results of that is what you see in Sigrid. So whenever we look at that, there's a lot of things that you can measure, but what should you do with that? And I think that's where the link will be when Ken starts on his content part. How do we actually map these things? For example, if you have business objectives, OKRs, how do you map them to your KPIs? How do you map business goals to system objectives? Or how do you monitor and improve code from within? It's a essential step to measure it, obviously, as you will see later on in the presentation. But how do you make sure there's no fuss about that, right? How do you make this as objective as possible? And then last, And definitely something that I hear the most whenever I talk to my customers is we don't have enough time to actually fix all the technical debt, all the technical work that we need to do. But what do we need to do, and what can we put at a later point in time? So these are the three main topics that we will dive into. And Ken, please do take over. I will go to the next slide.
Yes. So hi, my name is Ken Vernooyen. I work around a little bit more than 5 years for the Software Improvement Group in Belgium. And I started out as a technical consultant, and that means that I used Sigrid a lot to get some quality insights and try to translate them to management terms. Lately, I'm more concerned about guiding our customers using Sigrid, because I know that our platform is becoming more user-friendly and our customers are getting more mature to get those insights themselves. And today I will give you an introduction about quality insights, but let's take a step back because I want you to show you how you can best work with quality insights. And over the years, I've seen that there are two important aspects, and they are: one, transparency. So everyone works with the same data. And this is important because this can ensure open communication and also realistic planning. And during the Sigrid demo, I will show you a story. I will tell you a story about what I came across with some clients, how the quality insights and everyone seeing the same data led to more realistic planning. Also, secondly, being pragmatic or knowing when it's good enough, because striving to resolve all quality findings is not that cost efficient. So let's see how we measure code and how it leads to a definition of done, and not trying to be perfect, but good enough. So on this slide, you see that we, in Sigrid, we onboard some code. This can be low code, no code, or actual code. Low code and no code, we translate it to some readable format. And after that, we classify all the code blocks into classification of risks. SIG did a lot of research about when does a piece of code become too risky in maintaining it. So when does it take you too much effort to work with that piece of code? And one of the classifications is, for example, McCabe complexity. This is a metric of our maintainability model. And this means how many paths in your code base can you take? Theoretically, for every path in the code base that you can take, you should write a test. So everything, so you don't end up with unexpected output. And you see here that when you have 0 to 5 paths in your code base, that we classify this as green or a low risk category. And for example, when you have more than 25 paths in your piece of code, then we classify it as a very high risk and color it red. So then it's nice that we know what parts are more risky in terms of maintainability, but where the most value comes from is that we can put those classifications next to our benchmark. Because over the years, we've collected a lot of data about software, and we collect a benchmark that represents the market. This benchmark is calibrated every year and also certified by TÜV IT. And what it can do is it alleviates us from expert opinion that it's good or bad, but now we can say it's good or bad compared to the market. And talking about being pragmatic, when we look at the market, we see that even the a large amount of the market allows some parts of imperfections. For example, if everyone in the market has 3% of very high risk complexity code, then we consider that as market average. And on the right, you see the star ratings, and the 3 stars out of 5, they represent that you are market average compared to our benchmark. This star rating goes from 1 to 5, where 1 and 5 represent 5% of the lowest maintainable systems and the highest maintainable systems, and the 3 middle parts are all divided by 30%. So why is this important? We don't want to be perfect. We don't want to go to 5 stars. We don't want to fix everything in the code base. We want to be above market average. And if we go to the next slides, then we'll see why these stars are so important. They represent your quality compared to the market, and through research by Software Improvement Group, we can calculate how much effort and costs the maintenance would entail. And for example, if we compare a 4-star system with a 2-star system, we see that a 4-star system allows for 30% extra capacity in innovation and improvement compared to a 2-star system where you would have 40% capacity shortage for regular maintenance. And this also has an impact on different aspects of your development. For example, the time to market, the costs that you take to change something in your code base, the room for innovation, like you've seen, fewer incidents, but also a nicer working environment to hire new developers. And so we've seen the star rating and how it can allow us to allow some imperfections and be pragmatic to know when it's good enough, and we can aim for the 4 stars or above market average. But now about the communication part, and please interrupt me if you have any questions. I like this to be very interactive, and Hugo, also if there are any questions in the chat, please let me know. But we've covered the pragmatic part to know when it's good enough, but not the communication. And so we will show you what we come across in different companies when it comes to who is in charge of IT. And on this left side, you see a traditional top-down model where the managers decides what and how the software should be developed. And this often leads to frustrations in the development teams because management actually often does not have enough technical knowledge to know what are the best technical solutions for the software. But on the other end, we see a lot of companies where the developers have complete control about what they are implementing in the software. And since the development teams usually do not have all the business context, where they have knowledge where they can best invest in the software and which risks they can take and which they cannot, this also does not seem like the best model. So how do we meet in the middle? The middle block, we see that a path where management decides what will happen, it's a functionality, but also will translate the business goals, like Hugo mentioned before, into certain technical guidelines. And these guidelines do not tell you how to implement the software, because that's what the technical teams know best, how to do that. But it ensures that the development teams work towards the business goals. And these business goals, these guidelines can be in terms of technical depth, security, architecture, and so on. So communication here is key. Also, responsibilities is key, but it all ends up if you cannot communicate about data if you don't see the same data. So we will show you a demo where we cover some aspects, as you see here on the slide, how Sigrid supports the development workflow. And you see that from the beginning in the sprint planning, you can start by setting these system objectives, considering your business goals. In sprint backlog, you can allow the developers to refactor some code or see where the risks reside. During development, and this will be covered during the demo, you can find out on the piece of code that you're working on how it relates to other pieces of code in your code base and what you should be careful of or where you can improve while you're working on that. In the sprint review, we can look at what is changed and how did that impact the quality. And in the sprint retrospective, it's also a good idea to look at the architecture quality to see what the impact was on the architecture. Are there any expectations or questions that you already have before I show you Sigrid? Since this is a Sigrid introduction, I will tell you a story, a real story that I came across with a client, with other code bases, of course. And along the way, I will explain what you can see on the dashboard. And in this story, I will not focus on the typical story where we say that developers look at this dashboard to improve the code. I will tell you a story where I encountered that managers and the development teams looked at the same data and it led to some arguments and in the end, a more realistic planning. So if you open Sigrid, you see this portfolio overview, and this represents all the systems in this client's portfolio. And currently, this is open demo. This means that all these systems are open source code bases. And you can see, for example, if you might recognize some of them and look at the quality, like we mentioned before, the star ratings, which represent how they are doing in terms of maintainability compared to the market. We have different quality aspects that we look into, like maintainability, but also security, open source health. And as you can see here, there are quite a few. But let's go to the story. And I will tell you the story of the system Hadoop. So once upon a time, there was a manager and he had a feature request. And he wanted to add a feature very fast because the users required it in the native client. He wanted to add a new UI, for example. The development team really felt that that was not possible in the next sprint, but the manager kept on pushing. And the development team could not find the right arguments to convince him because more often than not, managers come across development teams that push back a little bit. So the development team went to Sigrid to find some arguments why they felt that it's not possible to do this in the current sprint. So they hopped over to the system and they knew that in this component of Hadoop, that new functionality should be added. And as you can see, it is a 3-star rating, so it's market average. There are some focus areas like module coupling, but this does not explain their feeling yet. So they kept on deep diving and they went to the Code Explorer where you can find the piece of code that you need to work on or a certain folder or component where you need to add the code. So they go to the native client that should be having a new UI and they click on that. And here you can see all the refactor candidates across different quality aspects for that specific component in your system. And here their feeling gets a little bit confirmed, because they see that there are more than 1,000 maintainability findings where there's a lot of duplication, for example. It's a lot of complex code, a lot of large interfaces. And they see also a very interesting thing, that there are a lot of security findings and reliability findings. So they knew that this was a legacy piece of code, and this confirmed that it's not easy to change something without enabling some security breaches or breaking the reliability to make and avoid that, for example, there's an outage. So they really wanted to look further into the components, so they went over to the architecture module, where you can see all the architecture components and really can deep dive into them. And at the top, you see some metrics that are related to the architecture quality. In the next Ask Me Anything session, my colleague Kriti will deep dive into all of these, but I will show you how this team actually found out that the knowledge distribution was their argument they were looking for. So they saw that this had a red marker, and they clicked on this. They went to search for the native client component, which was in the HDFS project. And here it is, the native client. And you can already see a sneak peek here why they felt they could not do it in the sprint. You see that the knowledge distribution, which highlights if it calculates how many people are working on certain components, and it also calculates how much expected work should be done on that component to keep it maintainable. And when we scroll down, we see the native client, and we see that it is a component of 30K lines of code. And here we see something very interesting. Nobody in the last year worked on that component. And it is expected that half an FTE should work on that component to keep it maintainable. So they noticed that it is a legacy component. It had a lot of technical debt. It had some security issues, some reliability issues. But most important of it all, they realized that the knowledge in the team was gone. The person that created this component was no longer in the team. And they collected all that data, and they went back to the manager and they presented it. The manager could also verify this in Sigrid, and the development team suggested two approaches. One approach was, we can do this in the sprint, but we need all the resources, and it will be implemented in a dirty way. That means that we will need time the next sprint to fix and resolve a lot of those issues that we will introduce. And there's a risk of security breaches and some reliability issues. The second option they presented was, give us one sprint to train some people in reverse engineering that component, in refactoring that component a little bit, so they can add the new functionality much easier the next sprint. The manager, of course, was not happy that his feature is not that straightforward to implement, but proactively knowing this enabled them to make a much more realistic planning and not hearing afterwards that it failed. So this example shows you that objective insights can open the communication if everyone works with the same data, not only to immediately improve the code base, but also see where you need time to push back on functionality and when you need to work on the quality first. So that was my story about the Hadoop team. I will go back to the portfolio and I will leave some room for some ideas, questions first.
Kostas, you may speak up, I think. Yes.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay. I think we all agree it's a classic one, a classic trade-off, a classic challenge in development teams. So yeah, at least from my experience, we've met lots of time in the past. So in my opinion, and of course I agree with your point, is in some cases how mature the development team is and how is ready, let's say, between the development team members to support the decision, also from a technical perspective and also from a sprint, let's say, scope perspective. So I suppose, because I'm new in this tool and this is my first days I'm trying to get familiar with, I suppose that a tool can help towards this direction, because otherwise it could be a theoretical discussion in terms of arguments. So thanks for the introduction in any case.
Thanks for the confirmation that you recognize this this as a story.
Yes, so maybe we, while people may be thinking of other questions, we can dive a little bit into the security and open source health. I think those were two main topics. Pretty interesting also as an integrated part.
We've seen that there's also a security tab here, where you can see that there are a lot of systems in the open source world where there are some critical security findings, which is pretty interesting. So if we look at system level, we can deep dive into the security findings. And this dashboard actually collects findings from a lot of different static code analysis tools. What do I mean by that? I will show you the finding origin, where you can see what tools came up with the different findings. And you might recognize some of them. You might recognize, for example, SonarQube, Checkmarx Kicks, which looks at infrastructure as code, and some other findings which are very specific for different technologies, for example. We collect them from different tools and we group them into models, like you can see here. This is the OWASP top 10 model. And if you need to report the status of your security in your systems, it might be possible that you need to report it in a certain model. You might recognize some of them like the PCI model, but we will now focus on the OWASP top 10. What do we do when we get a lot of findings from these different tools? We filter some of them out where we know that they are not that relevant for your system, or there are some overlapping findings between different tools. And we also add a layer on top of the finding, because we have some data about your system, like is it public facing or internal facing? And if it's public facing, we make the severity a little bit higher for certain vulnerabilities. Because, for example, you can see here broken access control. There are some findings for that are more severe when your system is faced toward the user, when it's public facing. And because this dashboard allows to collect all the findings, you can deep dive here and you can see that there are some findings from open source health. I will deep dive a little bit more later on. This is the tool of Sigrid itself, where we look at vulnerabilities in libraries that you use, but it also scans your own code, like this specific finding. I'll click on this one, and you can go to code level to see where it resides. You can see what it means, the finding, and you can also find out more by clicking on the CWE information about the weakness that represented this finding. The severity is calculated by impact and exploitability, but also, like I've mentioned before, some information about your system, like the public facing part. And you can also work on this and change the status if you recognize this finding, if you analyze it as an expert of your system to see if it's not a false positive. If it's really vulnerable, you can either put it on the backlog or accept the risk and add a remark here so everyone knows what needs to happen with this finding. If you change something, there's also an audit trail of who added or changed the status. To add this to backlog, we can go, for example, back to the code explorer like we've seen before. We can see that in this piece of code, I want to add this to my planning. And there are some maintainability issues as well. For example, this unit is very complex. And while I'm fixing these security issues, it might be a good idea to also fix the complexity. So I added these 3 items to the planning. And now you can see that there's a piece of text that has all the information and links towards Sigrid that have these 3 to-dos inside of them. And you can copy those to your backlog, for example, Jira.
Yeah, so this is an easy way to integrate Sigrid with your systems directly. There's also a way to integrate it through an API. There's more information in the documentation about that. It gets technical quite quickly, but you can read up on that. I think that makes sense. If you want to go that route and you need more help, please do ask us for it, obviously.
Yep. If you already have access to Sigrid, you can find the documentation up here.
I noticed that we have been talking about the objectives again earlier, and obviously we have been talking about it in the previous AMA as well, but maybe you can briefly reiterate where these are and how you can use them.
Yes. So if you go to a system overview, you might notice the system objective overview, where all the findings that we've seen before are very objective. It might be possible that you don't want to aim for 4 stars because the 2.6 here means that it's not that maintainable. It comes with some costs where you can also get some insights about this. But for example, if your system is going to be phased out in the next year, you don't want to focus on maintainability, but you might need to focus on security while it's still public facing in that year. And that's why objectives is very important, because you can add that knowledge about your business context and the path forward for your application by setting objectives for all of these quality aspects. So for example, you can set that the security max severity should be low. And you can also set it that the maintainability should not degrade, for example. Then you should change this to 2.6. And then you can make sure that this still remains green and it doesn't degrade your the maintainability while you're working on it that year. So when we add this system objectives per system, we can go to the portfolio dashboard, and where we've seen this overview of objective risks, we can go to the rate by objective completeness. And this shows you the same view for each quality aspect, but shows you if your own objectives are met or not. And here you can impact the priority of your findings based on all the knowledge you have about the business context of your systems.
So yeah, this is the link between the objective metrics and the goals that you can set on your system, or the policies that you can set on your system and measure it. So whereas maintainability is 3 stars, no matter the context can make it a good score or a bad score.
We also deliberately don't allow to tweak how we come up with the rating, because it's a very consistent model across different technologies, and it allows you to compare the rating between different systems in a consistent way, and also allows us to calculate the costs and maintenance effort that requires in that system. And tweaking the metrics would not allow to do that. So we added a layer on top to add objectives over your quality insights. So you can add the business context, but still get the knowledge about how much it costs to still maintain your system.
It's in our ever trying to reach closer to the objectives of you as customers. I mean, we provide the objective metrics already, but now we also have the extra layer on top of this. I hope that helps you.
Yeah, I'm new to Sigrid, so we haven't even connected it to our code base yet. So I'm working on that. But what I see here is very impressive. I'm really excited to see, where our code base lands in terms of all these objectives and things, and how we can improve it. So really looking forward to that part of it. There's a lot to it here, obviously. So just trying to kind of absorb your presentation and things, and I'm sure it's going to take some time to really, once we get working with it, understand, how we can really benefit, but the ability to really drill down into everything and even to the code is amazing. I did like the ability to be able to copy and paste into, tasks, and we use DevOps, so we'd be probably doing that. So very cool.
Good to hear. If you upload your systems in Sigrid and you are in need of training for you or your team, because we only touch the surface what's possible with Sigrid now, we can really also, for example, in the architecture tool, design, add your intended design and see if your code base adheres to your design. Those are all possibilities, but those are features that will be discussed in the next AMA. But if you're in need for training when you are onboarded, then please contact your delivery team or us, because we're more than happy to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good realization. We're barely scratching the surface of whatever is possible here, without going into much details, because we only have an hour.
Maybe one of the things that we will not cover during this session, but what is possible is also to integrate Sigrid in your pipeline, so you can get early feedback of your changes even before you push it to the master or push it to Sigrid. And that's good to implement that, to get some early feedback about the quality and the risks that you might have introduced while you're working on the code base.
Yeah, more information about this is in the documentation, by the way, Ken. Maybe if you can click on it and briefly show where it is. Documentation contains, next to just hand holding on the different features and how to get started with it. So it's also good, I think, for you, Costas and Tom. It also helps you in workflows, in how the different users, how the different stakeholders, from our perspective, work with the platform best. So there's more to it than just push this button to see that feature. Shall I take over again, Ken?
Back to you.
Round it up. Because what we talked about today are most of the features that you see here on screen in the yellow. We saw something about the objectives, we saw something about the code, we saw something about architecture quality. We didn't go much into detail, for example, about the delta quality, the differences between how it was and how it is in the future. There's more information about that in the documentation as well. So if you want to know about how that feature works and how you can use it best, yeah, feel free to go there. For example, if you are onboarding new systems or onboarding yourself, you can go to the left QR code. It's the same as on the documentation, so you can browse it yourself as well if you want to. The integration with your CI/CD, your agile development process, as well as how you could best manage your code quality in general. What are the best practices on that sense? We got them together on the documentation. That brings me to the final part of this session of today, which is that there will be more Ask Me Anything sessions. The next one is on architecture quality. That is a new feature that we will soon roll out to everyone in the organization and all of our customers. On November 23, our colleague Kriti will introduce you to that. She's the expert on architecture quality feature. From a consultant perspective as well as a development perspective. So she will introduce all the fine nitty-gritty details about this particular feature. And then later on this year, there's one more just before Christmas or Christmas holidays, where a to be determined speaker will handle the most frequently asked questions that we received in the past, well, 8 or 9 different sessions that we've had right now. So if you find this interesting, please do sign up for the next one as well. The link is already up. You can also Google for it or use the same link that you used to sign up for today. That brings us to the end, slightly earlier than planned, but I think that's never a problem. You have a few more minutes I can give back to you. I hope you found it interesting. And please, if you have any questions and there's more details that you need, do reach out to your contact person within SIG. Could be us, could be your customer success manager or your account manager or your delivery team, whomever you have the contact details of. So please do so. And thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Hugo. Thanks, Ken.
All right. No
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Bye.